Hi there, how are you doing? Welcome back to a new video on the channel. It is already close to December, which means it is even closer to January. January means January transfers, so that's exactly what we're talking about today. Today I'm telling you one transfer every single Premier League club needs to make the coming January. And starting things off with Bournemouth, there is only really one player you can talk about when it comes to players who are already in this squad, and that is Antoine Semenyo, both for his performances over the start of this season and because reports have now leaked that he has a 65 million release clause in his contract, which means a lot of Europe's biggest clubs will be hovering around him, probably trying to sweep in early and get there ahead of their rivals, which means he could probably leave Bournemouth already in January without Bournemouth being able to do anything about it. I went looking for a winger who can play on both sides as well, who has at least a comfortable enough control of his weak foot so that he can replace that output of Semenyo. And that's when I came across Jamie Leeuweling, so that is my suggestion for Bournemouth. He is a 24-year-old winger playing for Stuttgart. He is German, he can play on both the right and the left flanks. He's pretty comfortable with both feet and he's unbelievably fast. Plus, he looks to shoot more often himself than create for his teammates, which is quite similar to the way Semenyo plays his football, so I think that could be a really great like-for-like replacement. Now, as for Semenyo, I am suggesting him for Arsenal, because Arsenal, I said it over the summer that I thought Arsenal were going to win the league, and it looks like I'm going to be right. If they want to cement their place as title favourites, I think Semenyo would firmly do that job. He is again one of the best performers in this league who isn't already playing for one of the big sides, so that would be a massive statement of intent. I also don't think 65 million is an unrealistic amount of money for a player of his quality. And that left hand side seems to be the only side who has a hole in Arsenal's team, especially in the attack. And it feels unfair because Leandro Trossard has been absolutely fantastic for them this season. Every time Arsenal need another attacker, he's the one who steps up. And every single summer, us football fans are still suggesting players who could replace that particular position. And here I am yet again, but who else am I going to replace out of this starting 11? Gyökeres, Saka, Eze? Not really, no. So Semenyo on the left, I think that could be a really great deal for Arsenal. Aston Villa, I think it is now very clear to say that Unai Emery just doesn't trust Ollie Watkins anymore. And it is a shame because Ollie Watkins on his day is a really impactful player. But I've got to be honest with you, it's been quite a while since I've seen him on his day. Doesn't really have an awful lot of goal contributions this season, only just the one Premier League goal, if I'm not mistaken. So I thought, why not bring a proven Premier League goal scorer back to the Premier League? Especially given the fact that it is a World Cup year, maybe you could convince Ivan Toney to rejoin the Premier League. Just like I said before, this is a World Cup year, so you could convince him by playing himself back into Thomas Tuchel's thoughts. And Aston Villa just clearly need a number 9 who finishes his dinner, because they do create some chances, even though it's not necessarily the chances they need to be creating for the kind of wingers they brought in with Donyell Malen and Gesson. Those are players you kind of want to be able to send through on goal, and especially with the likes of Gesson, that hasn't really worked so far. But to have someone like Ivan Toney, not only to finish off those chances but to help you in build-up play, because you can just play it long, he can bring it down to one of your other attackers who are really fast, so could run onto that ball really quickly as well. I think that could be really interesting. Now I think Brentford could do so with some creativity, because they already have replaced the pace and the goal scoring output of the likes of Wissa and Mbeumo with Schade, with Ouattara, with Igor Thiago banging in the goals right now. But if they could have someone who can drift out wide but also play centrally and be that creative hub, someone like Mikkel Damsgaard for example, who they are kind of getting a bit over-reliant on in my opinion, I would suggest go and have a look at the Danish winger from Lazio, Gustav Isaksen. Because this guy is really creative, he has a pretty nice left foot if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, he would just really fit the Brentford way for one, because he's Danish, but that doesn't really matter. But He is one of these diminutive forwards who is playing for a struggling team in Italy and probably is going to get overlooked by the best sides who are looking for creative players, which means Brentford is the perfect club for him to join and develop even further. Brighton, I'm doing an opposite of the typical conveyor belt and I'm sending a Chelsea player to Brighton. I'm talking about Malo Gusto. Now, I've heard a lot of Chelsea fans say lately that they are kind of getting fed up with Gusto. On the one hand, it's understandable because Gusto playing means Reece James is probably on the bench and having his minutes managed, which is necessary because we all know how easily Reece James gets injured. But it's not fun. If you're a Chelsea fan, you want to see your best 11 players on the pitch, and Reece James is clearly quite some levels above Malo Gusto. But Malo Gusto isn't a bad player at all, especially in his Lyon days. There were a lot of exciting things to his game, and I think a club like Brighton, for one, could recognize that and could get that out of him. And it's also with this Brighton side, having players like Veldman and Weaver feature for them at right back, I think they could do with an out-and-out right back in there. Burnley, you need goals, man. Burnley are actually a lot more competitive than I had thought at the start of the season, which is great because you want to see a competitive relegation battle. And they've also got some quite interesting players, especially in the midfield. I think Leslie Ukuchukwu and Florentino next to one another is a really fun midfield to watch. But they just don't have anyone to put the ball in the back of the net consistently. I like Zian Fleming, but I like him more because of his running and his physical attributes than his footballing attributes, shall we say. Jadon Anthony had a red hot start to the season, but that's kinda dropped off now as well. That's why I'm suggesting Norwich's Josh Sargent. Now Norwich have had their fair share of struggles themselves this season, sitting in the Championship relegation zone, sacking Liam Manning after losing all 8 of his home games, and they've now brought in the Belgian coach Philippe Clement to turn around the ship or steady the ship. I think he'll probably be able to do so, or at least be able to keep them in the league this season and then build from that next year, but maybe Norwich could be able to raise some funds in January through a Josh Sargent sale, someone who, apart from this season, has proven to be a very good goal scorer in England. Okay, maybe on championship level, but let's be honest, there is quite a big chance that Burnley do go back down to the championship, and then you already have one of the best goal scorers at that level. Chelsea, maybe you could talk about a swap with Gusto for Jean-Paul Van Hecke. Now, the Dutchman, who is Brighton's centre-back, is probably not someone on Chelsea's radar, I'll be honest. And the simple reason is because he's probably a bit too old for their transfer policy. But as I've said in so many videos before, I think you need a couple of players who are a bit more mature, who have some more experience, to cover for those young lads. Because Chelsea, as a first 11, can beat anyone. And I mean anyone. We've seen it with the 3-0 against Barcelona. But Chelsea as a squad at this moment in time is just going to keep dropping points to the likes of a Burnley, Sunderland, Leeds, the promoted sides, or the relegation threatened sides, because there just isn't that maturity to get those performances over the line as well. I think a centre-back like Van Hecke could very much help with that. And I also think he knows Colwill from Colwill's time at Brighton, which means that partnership could develop even further as well. Crystal Palace, you probably need a centre-back because of a certain name we will get back to, and I'm quite sure you already know and are already sick of hearing about what club I'm talking about. But that centre-back could be Gonçalo Inácio from Sporting Lisbon. Now, the thing with Inácio is it's usually his teammate which get links with Crystal Palace, Ousmane Diomande, but the thing with him is he's a right footer as well who wants to play on the right. He does have really strong physical attributes, so I wouldn't mind him going to Crystal Palace at all, but I just think Inácio is better on the ball, is left footed and is just as comfortable in playing a back three, so maybe he actually should be the one you are targeting, especially given the fact that he's 24, Diomande is 22, so he'll probably be a little less cheap or a little less expensive as well. Everton are quietly building a really exciting team in my opinion. But it is that right back role which, I mean, right now it's being interchanged with a Seamus Coleman who is nearly 400 years old. and Jake O'Brien, who is nearly 400 meters tall, and me as a Newcastle fan, I know how brutal it can be to have one of these giants in the fullback zone. So I just think Everton go out there and sign an out and out right back. I'm suggesting the 23-year-old Venezuelan right back from Real Sociedad, Aramburu. Now, he has an unbelievable burst of pace on him, which is already a really useful trait to have for your fullbacks, but his defensive numbers are through the roof as well. So that's why I think he could translate his form for Real Sociedad towards the Premier League. For a defender, that's not always an easy thing to do, but he isn't one of those roaming fullbacks who just kind of gives me Frimpong-esque vibes. No, he is a real, not necessarily a sitter, but someone who does do the defensive work, someone who does track back, and I think that could be exactly what Everton need. Fulham! This is quietly starting to be a pretty dangerous season if you are a Fulham fan, hovering really close to that relegation zone. I think if you are Fulham, you go out there and you sign a striker in January. With Raúl Jiménez not getting any younger and with Rodrigo Muniz having lost quite a lot of football this season, I just think that's a no-brainer. And there is a certain Irish guy or Irish fella who I've already made a TikTok on. If you haven't seen the Project Pundit TikTok, by the way, please go ahead and check it out in the description. It's really fun. Every Monday, Wednesday and Friday a new TikTok about football. Back to Fulham though, I think they could really do with Troy Parrott from AZ. He wouldn't cost an arm and a leg, but this is someone who came through the Tottenham Hotspur Academy and who knows where the back of the goal is. He's operating at nearly a goal involvement a game at this moment in time for the Dutch Giants, so I think that would be a really great signing. And he's also someone who AZ would probably be okay with letting go, because on the one hand, they are one of these clubs who just say, if the money is good enough, we just sell and we'll reinvest because we back our scouting network. And on the other hand, they already have another young striker who is Dutch, so the same nationality from where the club is. And he's also really exciting, Max Meerdink, so I think they would probably be quite okay with letting Troy Parrott go. Leeds. Now Leeds could use a striker as well, so both Troy Parrott or Josh Sargent could be interesting shouts for Leeds. But I've decided to go with Kalimuendo of Nottingham Forest. Now he only joined them over the summer, but he's not really made any minutes, and at this moment in time I think Chris Wood and Igor Jesus both stand in front of him in the pecking order. So maybe if you're Leeds United, you could loan him for 6 months, offer him the chance to adapt to the league and get some goals into this side, because I'm gonna be honest, Leeds do everything really well except for finishing chances. Liverpool, I don't think we need to spend too much time on this. Bring in Marguehi. It is as simple as that. And if not Marguehi, just any other centre back, because you need centre backs. You don't just need centre backs, but you need centre backs. I said it over the summer. It's all nice to pay over £200 million for two centre forwards who kind of do the same thing. But maybe you could have just taken that 150 million you spent on Alexander Isak and, I don't know, signed two centre backs and a number 6. And if you did so, I am quite sure you would maybe not necessarily be challenging still for the Premier League title, but be in a lot better position than you are right now. City will probably be on the market for an out and out right back, because on the left they've now got Ait Nouri, who is that real out and out left back, and they've got Nico O'Reilly, who is world class at inverting into the midfield. So the left hand side is completely covered for them. The right hand side, however, is still Nunez to this day. How is this guy still starting games for Manchester City? If I were Pep or the backroom staff at City, I would have a look at Feyenoord's 19-year-old right back Givaro Reed, because this guy has unbelievable statistics, especially for his age, and given the fact that Bayern Munich already are showing some interest as well, and given the fact that the right back role is actually a bit of a problem position when you're scouting in the European market, I think that could be an incredible signing for Manchester City. Man United. Now Man United is always an interesting one to talk about when it comes to transfer videos. We all know they are looking for a midfielder, but what is it exactly that they need from that midfielder? Now I think they could use someone who can carry the ball from the defense towards the attack, but also can pass it from the defense towards the attack, and has the running capabilities of covering space, running in not necessarily in behind of the defense, but running just in front of Man United's defense if he's coming from a bit higher up, because there's usually big gaps in between Man United's midfield. I've decided to go with Pablo Barrios from Atletico Madrid. Now this is a Spanish midfielder, only 23 years old, but the engine on this guy is absolutely incredible. His ball retention is great. He dribbles with the ball really nicely, but he tackles strongly as well. He's combative. I think he could be a great signing for Man United. Newcastle United. Now Newcastle need some creativity in the midfield. There are actually two positions Newcastle should really be filling in January. A creative midfielder and a fullback who preferably can play on both sides. But I do think that creative midfielder is the most important one, because against deep-sitting defenses we don't really have an answer. That's why I'm going with a player we have been linked with over the last month, shall we say, and I'm unbelievably excited over this link. It's Kees Smit from AZ. Now, this is not necessarily the most fabulous sounding name, shall we say, or the most Now the name Kees Smit might not necessarily speak to the imagination straight away, but let me tell you, this kid is special. He is unbelievably silky on the ball. He has had compliments from the likes of Ronald Koeman, who is the national team coach for the Netherlands, that he does remind him of someone like a Pedri. And he immediately said that it isn't necessarily helpful, or immediately realized that it isn't necessarily helpful to label young players with comparisons of these absolute fantastic footballers. But Kees Smit is really down to earth. He really is incredible to watch, and I think he is just going to keep going from strength to strength. So please come to Tyneside. Nottingham Forest. Now Forest are actually quite deep in quite a lot of positions. So you might argue it could be best for this Nottingham Forest side to just give those players time to work with one another, to get that understanding of each other's positioning going. So I've decided to go with a goalkeeper for Nottingham Forest. I don't hate Matsels, but the thing with Matsels is just that, especially on set pieces, which is becoming such an unbelievably important part of the game, he just really lacks comfortability and strength in that aspect of the game. So if I was Nottingham Forest, I would just go ahead and knock on Manchester City's door and ask for the conditions of a James Trafford deal. We've seen that this guy is ready for first team football. He's been absolutely shafted by the arrival of Donnarumma at Manchester City, but if he gets first team football at Nottingham Forest and it works out there for him, maybe they could make that a permanent and he could come back into England recognition or contention. Sunderland. Now, I mean, there's not much Sunderland need at this moment in time, because they have been incredible at the start of the season, you have to admit it. But the one thing I would worry about for them is if either Granit Xhaka, who doesn't have the record to do so, or Noah Sadiki gets injured. One of those could be devastating already for Sunderland, because it takes out nearly all of the legs of this team. That's why I decided to suggest Sano from Mainz for them. Now this is a central midfielder who not only does have incredible running stats, but is also really creative, doesn't shy away from a challenge, and is only 24 years old, so you do have some resale value in there as well. I think if I were Sunderland, that could be a really interesting option. Tottenham! Now it's been a quite interesting start to the season for you guys, hasn't it? On the one hand, Thomas Frank has clearly steadied the ship in comparison to last season. On the other hand, he's getting a lot of criticism for playing a negative sort of style of football. And a lot of that has to do, in my opinion, with the midfield. Because you've got João Palhinha, who has yet again got the most tackles from out of any midfielder in the Premier League. And let's be honest, that's Palhinha. You know what you're getting from him. If you're expecting more than that, that's on you. His partner, however, is somewhere I think Tottenham could be upgrading, because most of the time it is Bentancur, but I think he is too stationary to be Palhinha's partner. That's why I would really like it if Tottenham went out and tried to loan in Kobbie Mainoo from Manchester United. I think having him alongside Palhinha is such an unbelievably balanced midfield and could be really fun, and it could actually ignite Mainoo's chances to be on the plane for the World Cup in the summer. West Ham! Nuno is finally steadying the ship, especially on the defensive end, but with the current centre backs I think that's going to keep proving to be a big struggle. That's why I decided to go with Jim City from Atalanta. Now this has a multitude of reasons. On the one hand, Jim City is already a great defender. Secondly, Jim City is 32 years old, which means for a centre back he's still got some years to go, but he's not on the young side. But that also means his market value will probably drop off quite significantly. At this moment in time, I think there's a lot of value to be had in slightly older players, because all of these big teams are looking at younger players exclusively to be able to sell them on. Lastly, this is a captain not only for Atalanta but for Albania as well. A leadership figure in that backline could be really important as well. I think this is a no-brainer for West Ham. Bring in Jim City, especially given the fact that Atalanta have been struggling as well this season, already throwing out Ivan Juric. Yeah, maybe. And lastly, Wolves. Now Wolves is a really difficult one, because you're probably going to have to look for a player who is okay with coming down with you to the Championship. I'm not the biggest fan of their left back Hugo Bueno, so I've decided to suggest Pedrosa, who is a Spanish left back playing in the La Liga. Yeah, I mean, for the future, to get back to the Premier League, why not? But I don't think it's going to be enough to keep you in the league this year, Wolves. I'm sorry. But anyway, those are my 20 suggestions for January transfers for every Premier League club. Please do let me know if I've misidentified any of the positions of need of your club. Please let me know which player you'd like to sign your club, or which player you'd like your club to sign in January, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.